So within my way of thinking about rider biomechanics, we have a number of topics which we consider are the essential pieces. And one of those is what we call plugging in. And plugging in is kind of how the rider's backside interfaces with the saddle and the horse. So let's just think about walk. And if this hand was the saddle and this was the rider's backside, many riders out there are doing a movement like this. They think they should drive with their seat, push the horse forward, and they're deliberately making movements like that. Some people have a rather wibbly-wobbly way of doing that, and some people have more of a push to it. But when you look at elite riders, it's almost as if the rider's torso was a carousel pole that grew out of a carousel horse. And between their backside and the saddle, you don't see any movement. Their breeches and their skin do not move on the saddle. Actually, the place where movement happens is that their seat bones move on the layer of flesh that is between the seat bones and the skin. Okay, so you've got your breeches, your skin, a layer of flesh, your seat bones, and your seat bones move over that layer of flesh. Whoever controls the movement of the rider's seat bones over that layer of flesh controls the speed of the horse's legs. So when the horse is taking the rider and the rider loses control of the speed of the legs, the horse is moving her seat bones, and she might think that she should be supple and she should go with the movement and she should have really big seat bone movements. Most riders have a seat bone movement that's way too big. It actually needs to be really quite small. I often suggest to riders that they think of halving it, and halving it again, and halving it again. So when you look at a really skilled rider, the outer casing of their skin doesn't move, but there are little movements of their seat bones within their butt that are a bit like my wrists here, just walking along. One seat bone moves, the other moves, one moves, the other moves, one moves, the other moves. There's no shove, there's no push, there's no wiggle, there's no jiggle. Many people have interesting variations on the theme where maybe one goes out to the side and one goes like that, and one goes out to the side and one goes like that. And it can be really interesting to think, if there was a pencil point on each seat bone, what shape would those pencil points draw? And what you really want is that they would draw a line that would be parallel to the seam line of the saddle. So the seam lines go forward and up and in towards the pommel, and your seat bone would move forward, up and in, forward, up and in, forward, up and in, forward, up and in. A bit as if your seat bones were walking along, or you could think of it like a horse with bad action with its front legs that we would say in England plaits, you would say in America braids, with that narrowing in. Okay, so maybe notice how many centimetres or inches do your seat bones move in each movement that they make. Do they move one side at a time, or do they move both sides together? Can you make the movement one side at a time? Can you make it smaller? Making it smaller will require you to firm up the muscles in your whole pelvic girdle. If you're bearing down, if you understand that use of your abdominal muscles, that will help you. It needs to feel as if you were having your pelvis in a corset rather than it was really jiggly and it was really mobile. So it's tiny, tiny movements, much smaller than most riders realise. It's kind of like, think of putting, let's say, a 2-pin electric socket or electric plug in a socket in the dark. And you might get the pins and go backwards and forwards over the holes, and then at some point, gluck, the pins go into the socket. And that's what you want to feel. Instead of your seat bones going backwards and forwards over the holes, it's almost as if there are sockets in the horse's back to them to fit into. You could think of those little plastic cowboys and Indians, where the cowboy would fit into his little plastic horse. So there's that quality of still that we call plugging in, that makes the rider look like a carousel pole out of a carousel horse, that makes her a really good mould for the tiny little movements in the horse's back, rather than overkilling on those movements and moving way, way more than the horse. That's like white noise. It's like static on a radio that isn't well tuned. And your aim is to fine-tune the tuning, not do what most people do, which is just to turn up the volume.